So here's the real problem. The problem is not the individual. The solution is the individual. The problem is not Trump any more than the problem was Hitler or any one of the other thousands of, unconscious, devious people that have walked this earth that have caused so much harm to so many. The problem are the millions of people who believe and follow them. And this is called the collective. The collective is the problem. Ignorance is of the collective, but where was that ignorance gained? It was gained at the individual level. So therefore, you can view this through just simple logic. The individual will be the solution.
What in the world is going on? Where is it going? And how does it involve me? What is this insanity all about? Welcome to Becoming You, the Path to Consciousness, where we apply spiritual wisdom and truth to your everyday life. I'm Terry Hasty.
And I'm Haydn Hasty.
And starting today, we're going to move through 3 episodes that are all connected. So we have a trilogy of episodes that are going to build on one another. We're going to examine 3 levels of understanding what is happening in the world today. And believe it or not, we're not going to discuss politics or personalities. There are enough people doing that. It's not that we aren't tuned into what's happening. I'm following the monks walking for peace on Facebook and find that just to be so remarkable. And my heart is with the people in Minneapolis. It's impossible not to be empathetic and compassionate and be aware of what's going on. But we all have our part. And this is what Haydn and I are doing. And I think it's funny, Haydn, that we've actually been preparing to do this for the last 15 years without knowing it. Really through our work in consciousness.
Well, that's the key. We didn't know it. We didn't know where it was going to end up.
Right, but we really were drawn to it and so intentional and so happy and honored to have the opportunity to learn this and work with this. And now to be able to share it with people is just so powerful. And really, I think about the last 30 years as we've worked in leadership development around integrity and emotional intelligence, dealing with conflict, and how we wove consciousness into that over the last decade or so. So we believe this work and this understanding can be so valuable in understanding the collapse and destruction that we're all witnessing. But we're going to have to be intellectually and spiritually, and that's another level, honest about what's going on, in particular, what is my role in it? What is the individual's role in it?
Because this isn't going to be easy.
No, and it's not like the collapse is finished collapsing and hundreds, thousands of people. It's really, wouldn't have no idea what the number. People's lives have been upended, even ruined. And of course, that's not over yet. And we need to begin to gain some new skills to learn how to deal with these events individually, but also what is my part in it? What is my role?
So we're going to begin with the first episode around the violent darkness, not just in the United States, but also found throughout the world. This is a stage of ignorance, which is a very kind way of saying it's a stage of stupidity. And the second topic in the second episode, we're going to go into what we're calling the middle zone and how this is forcing each of us to examine really carefully our own lives and the role that each one of us has in these events. The middle zone is the zone between the collapse that's taking place right now and the new beginning, which will be the third topic in which we'll describe the spiritual technology or the practical transformation of the individual that is being born right now out of these very historic evolutionary events. It involves a new beginning and what Sri Aurobindo referred to as the age of subjectivity, that is about the internal spiritual changes that the individual will experience. So we have the stage of ignorance, the middle zone, and the age of subjectivity. And this episode focuses on the stage of ignorance, which is where humanity is right now.
So Haydn, just because some of this is new to many of us, could you just take a minute to talk about this process of change from the stage of ignorance to the stage of subjectivity?
The outer process is really not unlike the individual process. That's why the individual can identify with it because the individual has experienced this in their own life. They just didn't know it. As consciousness increases, the level of destruction that is needed to effect change and evolution decreases. In other words, when you stop being stupid, you don't require difficult circumstances to force you to grow as much as
And
they did
I
when you were
think that's
younger.
a really practical reason to, like, why we said last time, why should I even invest in evolution or put my time into it if it's going to happen anyway? Everything's
So
always
you don't
evolving.
have to keep learning the
Right.
hard way.
Yeah.
That's a really good motivation to consider this. A transition that maybe might have taken 10,000 years in a state of really dense ignorance can theoretically be accomplished in a number of years or, certainly less than a century as conscious evolution begins, which is what is happening in the world today. We
It's
are
definitely
starting to
speeded
wake
up.
up. Yes, absolutely. Sri Aurobindo said, and I quote, he said, "A few years can do the work of centuries when the spirit is in front." But of course, the spirit is not in front of what we see in the world today. And this is going to be a defining characteristic of the age of subjectivity, and it's why we're doing the work. But there are other things that we have to talk about first before
But
we get
just
there.
just to be clear, so what you just said in Sri Aurobindo's quote is that evolution is faster when the spirit or the soul is in the driver's seat or is in front rather than the ego. Before we move on, just let me clarify what you're saying. What Sri Aurobindo was saying is that evolution is faster. We learn faster. We grow faster when the spirit or the soul is in front instead of the ego.
Well, the individual knows this. You can look back over your life and let's say that your intentions were really just around fulfilling your desires.
Hmm.
But when you started maturing and getting past that, you noticed that things could speed up. It didn't take as long
Hmm.
to accomplish what you wanted to accomplish. So to say again, the outer process, the individual knows a great deal about, they just may not be aware of it. And this understanding matters because that's what's happening in the evolutionary process. That's what's happening in the world today. We are moving, we are being forced to move from self-awareness to consciousness.
And again, another way to say that is moving from self-aware to consciousness is to say we're moving just from the mental to the spiritual, or from the ego to the soul, or we're moving from the physical to the metaphysical. And I think the reason this is so
Or you
important.
could say, and this is important because a lot of people will identify with this, we're moving from the material to the spiritual.
And I think it's so important to consider this is why the collapse is happening. Well, the collapse isn't required, but we weren't getting it without the collapse. In other words, we were just going along with our closed tape loop
We
of
insist on
achieving
learning
and
through
acquiring.
catastrophe.
Yeah.
That is the path of humanity. So
And so it's really a catalyst for a new beginning. And I think that that's such a difficult dynamic. I know someone who's close to us was just laid off just because that's something that's happening now, too. And they said, nobody really wants change. I thought it was so interesting because we do say we like change, but to get up in the morning and say, I think I'll just go without a job for a while and see how that works out. I don't
and
think
see,
people
uh,
really wake up and do that.
see if
So
that can take me closer to my dreams.
closer
But
to
but
my
if you don't want
soul
to
or my
change, it's
spirit. Yeah.
perfectly okay. There's no judgment about that. But the universe will do it for you. And as anybody can see, whether it's in a human being's life or it's in nature itself, it does not tolerate inertia. You're not going
Right.
to be allowed to stay the same.
But
So all the more reason why these understandings are so important.
But I don't want, and you don't either, we don't want to minimize the pain and the difficulty that a collapse like that brings about. It is a a pressure cooker. It's an intense compression and much more for some people than for others. But I think we all feel it. I had a dream the other night when I was down at my mom's that we were all on the Titanic and it was sinking. I think people are feeling that way. And the old mind, the old way of seeing things around security and materialism, as you said, it's not going to be able to translate or even initiate this shift toward the spirit. It's just not what we've been
And if I remember
trained toward.
what you told me about that dream, you said that I was lying there, but I wasn't particularly upset.
No, I said, I'm scared that we should have started swimming. And you
Okay.
said,
Oh, it's okay. It's all right. Everything's going to work
well,
out,
yeah.
which is, I was kind of happy about the fact that you saw that in the dream. Would love to evolve to that,
Yeah.
to be able to, everything's okay. Everything's going to
To not
work
just
out.
see it's okay after the fact, but to be
Right.
able to be in the midst of the compression or the contraction.
Well, time is the tool of the soul to enact this stuff. In other words, time is the tool of the soul to realize itself in a physical body. In fact, it's a function of consciousness itself. So, yes, we are witness to the collapse of the old, and that is a fact. But we also invite you, the listener, to see through this collapse, as hard as it is to see what your eyes cannot see, a new beginning. And if ignorance is the catalyst for destruction and collapse, then the transformation of the individual is the key
Hmm.
to the new beginning.
And so here we are, Hayden, in the stage of ignorance. And again, we aren't talking about any one person or any group of people.
I think it's okay to talk about a group of people, which is all of us.
Right.
We are all part of this.
That's what I
This is
meant.
why it
It's
is happening.
Yeah, but it's a good time to remind ourselves that we are spiritual beings in a physical form. But I don't think that we've done a really great job of developing our spirituality. Like, as much as, and I should just speak for myself, as I develop, the intellect or skills or emotional intelligence or things that are more measurable.
Yes, that's true. We focus on developing our intellect and our skills, but there's another piece, which is we are highly, highly ingrained mentally, physically, and emotionally in pursuing materialism. If I get enough money, I'm going to be okay. If I have this stuff, I'm going to be so much happier, et cetera, et cetera. And of course, it's not true.
Yeah.
So that issue of materialism is tied to this collapse.
And we can really see it if we compare two great countries that are, we could look at these as very obvious contrasting countries, where India, for example, is deeply spiritualized. It's steeped in ancient wisdom, but physically, India is impoverished and have so many issues around the material. And then here in the United States, while we're deeply materialized and we have more money and things and extravagances than any place, we're spiritually bankrupt. And we can look around and see that. I'm not being critical or judgmental. I hope it doesn't sound that way. But we can see the absence of balance and unification of the physical and spiritual worlds personified in these two countries. But we can also oftentimes see it, in ourselves. The things I'm afraid of often are lack of security, lack of financial well-being, lack of relationship. For example, I don't think people go to sleep and worry about the lack of spirituality in their lives. It's just not something that's, in your face. It's a much quieter
No,
aspect.
because materialism, it dominates in the United States how the mind functions. We've grown up being told that we live in the richest country in the world, and look what's happened.
Yeah, we can see such an imbalance, such a disconnect when there's so many people who are struggling for basic things, and then a few people who seem to have the vast majority, a high percentage of the wealth in the country.
The top 1% of households in the United States own roughly 30% of the nation's total net worth. And the 50% down on the bottom, own 2.5%.
Yeah. But, the thing that I want to come back to is that we know that the individual is the key to the resolution. It's not going to be, obviously, legislation. It's not going to be something outside of us. It's going to be the individual that brings about the change.
To set the stage, it's important to realize that in order to understand these things, that lots of times we're going to have to go outside of our normal mindset
We get
to
the end of what we know. We've got to.
that doesn't take long for anybody. So we're going to be forced to go beyond what we currently understand and access resources and understandings that do contain the answers and solutions to these problems. For example, Hinduism precedes Christianity by at least 2,000 years. And in that mythology, which is so rich in spiritual wisdom, there are time frames that are referred to as the yugas. You have 4 yugas, and the yuga that we are stuck in right now, through the Hindu mythological concept, we are stuck in the.
Well, you should say what the 4 are and let them figure out which one we are. So there's the golden age.
Well, even the words
right, that's what I'm saying.
hint,
We've got golden age,
which is
silver age,
the golden, silver, bronze,
and iron.
and
So
iron.
which one? Drum roll.
Which one are we stuck in? We're stuck in what is referred to as the Kali Yuga, or the Iron Age, and this is the worst of the 4.
And just as a metaphor, I thought this was really interesting. The Dharma is the 4-legged bull, and at the Golden Age, the bull has all 4 legs. At the Silver Age, the bull has 3. At the Bronze Age, the bull's down to 2. And on the Iron Age, the bull is balancing on just 1 leg.
So that's not going to last
right.
very
That's
long.
not a very stable situation.
Right. So the collapse that we are in right now is really.
But it's a great metaphor to be able to see that.
This is a period that we are all witness to of. It really is. It's a period of spiritual darkness and ignorance, violence, corruption, greed. It's such a profound lack of judgment. You name it, it's taking place. And it's also where materialism is viewed as the only true reason or solution for the substance of existence and the problems that go along with our existence. And all of this is taking place, and we are all part of it.
And I think every bit of that leads to this underlying despair that's also part of the collapse, because if the human being thinks that materialism, outer success or reward is going to save us, ultimately, everybody knows in the quiet and the dark that that's not true.
Well, if 50% of the population is reduced to only owning 2.5% of the nation's wealth, the despair is built into the economic policies.
It's also built into the people who have the most, because they know that that is not the truth.
They will not be immune. And when I say they, I'm not talking about particular personalities, but no one is going to be spared in this, and yet no one is going to be left out. It depends upon the growth that we can make consciously and spiritually through this period of time, which is not particularly known. In the early Hindu mythologies, when they talked about the time frames for the yugas, it referred to the Kali Yuga as lasting 432,000 years.
Yikes.
And I read one source that said that we were only in the 5,000th year of the Kali Yuga, which means, good news, we've only got 427,000 more years of this garbage to go through. But that's not necessarily true. There's another idea, and it's the one that I support, and my opinion doesn't mean anything, but they are not fixed years. But instead, they're like psychological or evolutionary seasons that we all go through. We go through periods of growth and expansion, then we go through periods of compression and difficulty in our life. So it's not that we don't know this. It's just once it is taking place in the collective, The problem is that you cannot change the collective. You can only change the individual.
And whether we look at the mythology of the Kali Yuga or we just look out the window or watch the news, we can see there's so much corruption. There's so many forms of it: greed, just straight up dishonesty, abuse of power. Of course, we're seeing violence across the world. And here is a big descriptor of the age of ignorance and this kind of stupid times. It's weaponized opinion. And opinion everywhere online, opinion everywhere on the sidewalks, opinion everywhere in conversations has replaced truth,
Virtue,
justice.
or,
Yeah.
being able to adhere to a particular set of values that, that are for the good of the all. People today literally cannot see the truth because the mental opinion literally acts like a physical blindfold. We refer to this as the JBOP system, which I think we've mentioned before.
Judgments, beliefs, opinions, prejudices, perceptions, positions. We all have them. We all have tons of them. We collect them all through our lives, and we change as we go. We change our mind. But we have a set of JBOPs
pretty consistent.
that we can get activated into, I can get activated into, and then it's hard, or I'm unwilling, or I have to really manage myself of hearing opposing JBOPs.
Or you have to wait for an entire collapse to occur,
right.
to go, well, maybe it'd be good for me
Or
to
even
change
being
my
willing to
mind.
listen to someone else's JBOPs.
Well, we all
But it's
get
hard to see
stuck.
the truth when we're so mired in all our judgments and beliefs and opinions.
This is the veil
Mhm.
between the material and the spiritual. Let me say that again. It is the mental veil. The accumulation of stuff in the mind is just content. That is the veil between the material and the spiritual. But, let's not be naive about this. We all get stuck in believing that our JBOPs are real, and this causes all kinds of suffering, not just for ourselves, but for other people.
We've all had the experience, if we take it down to a really basic daily, of having the perception. I remember my mom was looking for that bill after my dad passed away, and she was kind of freaking out. She couldn't find the bill, and she knew she had to get it paid. And she said, I've looked everywhere. I've looked in the recycling. I've looked in every drawer. I can't find it. And I said, well, what color was the envelope? And she said, it's blue. It's a blue envelope. And she was really frustrated. I said, okay, we're looking for a blue envelope. When we found it on the counter, it was in a white envelope.
Right, and that's happened to everybody.
Why we couldn't find it.
Right, exactly, because what you're looking for is not there.
Right.
Looking for love in all the wrong places. But this is part of the evolutionary process and what is happening
But we
to
convince
us.
ourselves that it is a blue envelope.
Right, of course.
Regardless of what it really is.
In these days and times, the mind's opinion is not a byproduct of the intellect or even logic, but it is a byproduct of the lower emotional needs and the impulses. And one of those key needs at the lower level of the emotional framework that you can witness 24 hours a day is the need to be validated.
We even do it like, I'll say, I love you, Haydn. And I'm waiting.
Right. Waiting for me to reply. I didn't know where you were going with that.
Or I'll say, hey, how'd you like the way I cooked those potatoes? All kinds of ways that we're looking for validation.
Right. Well, that's a good point, because no one likes being responsible for validating another person.
Yeah.
Because it eventually leads to resentment. But we all grow up seeking that.
But now we've taken it to a whole nother level.
We get to witness the screaming and hollering all the time in order to be right. And it's not about truth anymore in the age of ignorance. It's about using opinion as a means to validate myself. Even if my opinions end up hurting other people. In fact, the harming of other people, according to my framework, would actually validate my opinion, which then causes me to, you see, I told you, and here we go, stuck in the ego and not able to get out.
And I think we're kind of back to putting the value on all the materialism, which we know deep down is temporary. And so in this despair, we're just trying to validate ourselves, even, intellectually. And that's why we said in the beginning, we'll have to be intellectually and spiritually honest with ourselves.
Because this is going to be hard work. This is gonna require from each one of us a focused
Yeah.
intention, not an opinion, but a focused intention on what we want to see happen in the world.
Because literally the self-inflicted blindness that I've heard people start, like, on the news, start to say the opposite of what I think, and my brain says, "I'm not listening to that. I'm not gonna," and that's this self-inflicted blindness to what is actually true, this resistance to logic. And even what is in our best interest will push back against that in order to be right. This immunity to logic has been argued by many psychologists, that, as we've all witnessed, that even when truth and fact, as provable fact, are presented to an unconscious person, that person would reject the truth, the obvious truth, and remain in this kind of online echo chamber where their position is validated by other unconscious people who share the same J-bops that they do. And
A compound stupidity.
yeah.
But we've all participated in that. So this is not about condemning a particular political party, etc.
No.
We are all part of this
Well,
process.
it's even hypocrisy is just seen as, well, there it is again. We don't even see it as a problem oftentimes. We just expect it. There's an idea of, I can look like I know what I'm doing, but I don't really have to know what I'm doing. That my simple opinion entitles me to a position for which I have no qualifications other than just an opinion. We see authority given to those who have a social media presence or the most likes, the most followers, even though how do we know if they do what they are talking about or if it's all
How do
talk?
we know if their life is based upon the
Right.
things that they are advocating?
And
We do not.
I think one of the big things that I just never want to
And for
be.
what it's worth, that's going to have a lot to do when we move into the middle zone episode, which is next, is confronting that and developing some skills in how we deal with that.
Well, one of the problems that I see is that logic or truth, science, reason, they're no longer used for discovery or expansion, or change, but really it's around
They can't,
manipulation.
they're not able to solve the problems that we now face as a humanity. And that's okay. That's all right. All that means is, well, the answers must be somewhere else. But this is the Kali Yuga at work. This is the age of
Yeah.
ignorance at work. It is forcing the change
And
forward.
see, as we talk about it, I feel the Iron Age. I feel the grip of it, of the overwhelmingness of the attachment to getting validated rather than hearing or knowing or living the truth.
If you say something really ridiculous, but all of a sudden you have a room full of people applauding you for what you say, you might say to yourself, maybe I'm not so crazy after all.
But the truth does shine through. It can be delayed, it can be boxed up, but it can't be destroyed. And so, Hayden, I'd love to explore this idea if you're okay with it at this point. Is it possible that this chaos, this bull on one leg, this collapse is not accidental? I
Well,
mean, I
of
have my
course,
opinion about it.
but it is very difficult for the mind to accept this. But let's see if we can see through the mess and consider another approach to this age of ignorance that we are all dealing with. Is it possible that it's not accidental? Is it possible that there is behind the scenes a power larger than the human will that is directing things?
As if
You
it's not, we might as well just all get a helmet.
may as well. If
Yeah.
it is accidental, then we're right back to the very beginning of the evolutionary process, which is, what is my existence about?
So if it's not accidental, then you, everyone has taken birth to be part of these events, and we have a role to play, a
A-
significant role to play.
As I said earlier, no one is going to be spared in this. And I'm not just talking about today. This is going to be going on for years ahead of us. But
Mhm.
no one is going to be spared, but no one's going to be left out. The individual is free to change. Are you going to choose to be part of the forces of ignorance, or are you going to choose to be an instrument of love, of growth, of expansion, of unity and freedom and equality? And so here's the real problem. The problem is not the individual. The solution is the
Mm.
individual. The problem is not Trump any more than the problem was Hitler or any one of the other thousands of, unconscious, devious people that have walked this earth that have caused so much harm to so many. The problem are the millions of people who believe and follow them. And this is called the collective. The collective is the problem. Ignorance is of the collective, but where was that ignorance gained? It was gained at the individual level. So therefore, you can view this through just simple logic. The individual will be the solution to this.
Hmm.
You can't change the collective. Ignorance is the backbone and the engine and the gasoline of all processes of destruction.
It's
And you've
kinda like
experienced that in your own life as an individual.
I was thinking about I might not have this quote exact, but the mother not the mother, Mother Teresa said, "Don't worry about doing great things. Focus on doing small things with great love." That the individual has immense influence and power when the intention is, whether it's consciousness or love or unity.
The key to the changes coming down the road are going to be based upon individual transformation. And this is what we have to face and discuss and have to deal with. And to be intellectually, as you said in the beginning, intellectually and spiritually honest, because that this is going to be hard work.
And
This is not going to be as simple as winning the midterms and everything's going to be okay. That is not true.
And it's not and no matter what happens at midterms, we're not gonna go back because that's not how evolution works. We're not just going to be
The
able to go
doors are
back
being closed. The exits are being closed. We are being forced
forward.
into this new movement and a new evolutionary process in which we are going to grow spiritually. The question is, how much damage is going to have to take place in order for that to occur?
So we're being forced, not into a corner, but forced, like through the camel through the eye of a needle or, forced through, the evolutionary
Well,
process.
you don't have to be forced. You can say, "Okay, I get it, I
Mm.
understand," and participate in the process. But, it's rare to even see an individual do that. The ignorance that we're witness to today really sees itself as invincible. You can show someone a provable fact, and they will dismiss it.
Mm.
We are moving through this age of ignorance in which opinion has substituted for truth. And that's okay. That's part of it.
But the ignorance is really serving a greater cause.
Absolutely. But the cause is invisible. It is the evolutionary process. And the question that you have to ask, of course, is what is that? You know, why are we here? What are we doing here? And I don't want to try to cram too much into this episode, but there is a reason it is happening, and it is not about the physical. We've all learned that survival of the fittest, etc. That is not true. What is the fittest? The fittest is getting ready to change. The fittest will be spiritually based,
Mhm.
not
And I
materially
see
based.
shifts of that already in a really practical sense, but we're not talking about personalities and specific dynamics. But this brings up two thoughts that come to mind. One is Sri Aurobindo quote when he said, "When the darkness is absolute, it is the sign that the sun must rise." But it makes me think too of that line. I had to look up. It's Thomas Fuller. He was an English theologian. in about, well, the middle 1600s who said, and we've all heard this one, it's always darkest before the dawn.
And it's true.
Yeah. But
But
where's the
there
sun? Where's the
Right,
sun?
but there is a dawn. So we're being forced into a corner. And the remedy to this, the vaccine to ignorance, is individual transformation, but that exists in a different reality than the one that has created this age of ignorance. So the box in which we're imprisoned is also simultaneously the middle zone, which we'll come to that in the next episode, but it's a zone between the ignorance and the truth. The ignorance, as you said, it is serving a greater cause.
Really,
And what is that? What is that greater cause?
well, if to follow along with what we've been saying so far in this episode, the death of reason, of logic, of truth is not the death of truth, but the death of reason and logic is the birth of the spirit, that the death of kind of all of the value being put on the physical is the value being moved into the spiritual.
Simply put, the evolutionary process is the endless movement of the spiritualization of the material.
Mm.
But if the material
Heaven on earth.
heaven on earth, but heaven in the physical, not just in an invisible concept where you have to leave the planet in order to experience that, but not only to experience it, but to become it. And so this is the difficulty that we face.
Well, it's, if our world is changing and the collective is changing through the individual's transformation, then I really don't want to waste my time. I want to be part of it at a more conscious level, not just, going with the flow or like I stayed awake talking to my mom the other night about all of the goings on and then ended up not being able to sleep. It doesn't do any good. The real work, the real intention would be on my internal, on spiritualizing.
Exactly, and that's what
Yeah.
we're going to discuss in the next episode in the middle zone, where we'll move out of the descriptions of these stages and look at precisely what it is that we're going to have to learn and how you can begin to participate in these days and times. We are spiritual beings in a physical body, but as we stated in the beginning, we have not become spiritualized. And this is part of the reason that the collapse is happening. So we're evolving at an accelerated pace, and this is the work that lies ahead of us. Consciousness doesn't argue with the mind. It goes beyond the mind and accesses the very substance and the truth of the reality of who we are as human beings, which is the soul seeking to realize itself in physical form. And so it's really so amazing to consider, as difficult as these circumstances are, that we are part of this remarkable evolutionary event.
Now, if it's not just words, but I really feel the soul is manifesting in my physical life, in my relationships, in my work, in my speech, what I say to other people, what I say to myself, what in the world would my soul then experience? It wouldn't be fear and the Titanic is sinking, and it wouldn't be separation and disconnect and disharmony and anger. The soul certainly wouldn't want to manifest into that form.
The soul
That's the whole purpose of this collapse.
The soul could manifest heaven on earth right in the middle of a collapse. There have been hundreds and thousands of great individuals that have demonstrated this, that in spite of the difficulties, the realization of who they were and their purpose and destiny in life took them beyond the confines and the limitations of the mind and experiencing heaven right here in the middle. I'm not trying to sound religious, but right in the middle of hell. that's the journey. That's the entire purpose, and that's how hell or the age of ignorance gets transformed.
I was about to
So our
say
work is here. It's not after we pass away.
I was about to say there's so much to look forward to, and then you brought hell into the picture. So I want to go back to where I was thinking. There's so much to
Well,
look
as far as
forward
I'm
to.
concerned, the word hell is a very polite word for what we're going
Yeah.
through right now.
What I was thinking about, there's so much to look forward to. If the soul is its purpose of all of this um, descent and collapse is for the soul to manifest its true self in physical form, then there's a lot to look forward to. And that's what we're going to be exploring in the next two parts of this trilogy of episodes. And
Well, the age of ignorance is it's like being in a dark room, and I mean a dark room, and you cannot find the light switch. You have no idea where it is. So you're moving along the walls
holding your hands out, hoping you don't run into anything.
Right, exactly.
But
you do.
the middle zone, I love. We take that metaphor. I love metaphors. We take it a little further, and it's like the light's on. You found the light switch, but your eyes are so accustomed to the dark, it's hard to see what's happening and what these forms are in front of you.
Or
So that's part
you
of the
might think of it
practice.
as you found the light switch, but for some reason it's a different kind of light switch than the one that you're used to, and you're fumbling around and struggling and trying to figure out how to get it to work, which is what the middle zone is going to be about. So, as we move toward the end of this sharing, I'd ask yourself, what am I to do as a single individual in the middle of all of this? What is my role? How do I learn what I need to learn to be able to deal with the difficulties not only of the world that are affecting not just me, but everybody, but my own difficulties? Looking at how to solve and answer those questions in the next episode.
So thank you so much for joining us. And if this was of resource to you and you're enjoying this conversation, consider joining our private online community. You'll find it at becomingyoujourney.com. It has lots of resources, face-to-face time, and also resources you can do on your own time. You can check out truthspringasheville.com. Asheville is ASHEVILLE. You can see our workshops, our face-to-face workshops, virtual workshops, and also face-to-face and virtual individual coaching if you're interested in that. And we would love to have you join us in person in New York at the Omega Institute. That's going to be July 31st through August 2nd. And what a beautiful campus that is. You can go to their website at eomega.org to register for that. And you would find the name of that workshop is Becoming You, the Path to Consciousness.
So thank you so much for your time, and we look forward to sharing with you in the next episode as we move into the middle zone and start figuring out, okay, what are we going to do now?